before. So we do have people watching. I think Joanna and Rich are both here. What's up, everybody? How's it going?
Hey!
We are back.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning. Wherever you might be.
We've already got a crowd. We got like conversations and I think these are all the quotes from tonight. It's hilarious. I think this is all from tonight. So I don't know if this is from tonight or not because these comments came in early, but Joanna posted that it's a trap, and I came across a meme that or a GIF that someone posted to me in our internal chat program at work. There was Akbar like standing there like holding a tarp and going, "It's a tarp." Like, it just made me so happy.
Oh no. I mean, I love like all the references to that. I feel like that was like gotta be one of the first memes. I mean, down to I know that Family Guy like overdid it on the "It's a Trap" references. I think their version of Return of the Jedi, because they reproduced all of those. Family Guy did Star Wars as the Blue Harvest.
Oh yes.
Empire was something Dark Side. Which is great. And then Return of the Jedi was It's a Trap. And then they hold out on you until he finally says, they have like Akbar going crazy. He's like, "It's a trap, it's a trap, it's a trap." There, I said it. But yeah, I love that.
By the way, I went back and watched because I hadn't gotten a chance to do it yet. I went back and watched the Robot Chicken Dr. Ball I went and found it.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
That was fantastic. I love when he comes in the room and he's like, the very first thing Vader's like trying to torture somebody. He goes, this is like a vaccine. Like, what are you talking? He goes, I'm leaving. You get back here. Good. I said, good day, sir. And he like flips out of the room. But yes, the Padme one is like, what does he say? Like, she's lost the will to live. All the technology in the entire galaxy, and you freaking weirdos can't even use it. She's just lost the will to live. And I'm like, oh my god, that is just...
No, I love how it's shot like a 70s like medical drama. And I keep like, there's one with like Jack Klugman that I like, the deep reference there. It's a guy who works for a police department, and that is exactly the way that it's shot. And he's Dr. Ball is just like floating by with his little bag. I love that. I love what she lost the will to live. Did you people go to medical school? It's so great. It's one of my favorites. I mean, I can honestly talk about like parodies, like Star Wars parodies. I mean, I'm surprised we've never done that, Jeff. Like, I know we're jumping right into this on this week at the Kessel.
I'm writing
chat.
this down. I'm writing this down. Next,
but I mean, seriously, like, we could do an entire episode on Spaceballs. Because man alive. And another Star Wars parody, which is an actual Star Wars property, which is the holiday special. Oh my gosh! I remember I remember someone coming to me and saying, hey, do you like Star Wars? And I was like, oh yeah, I love Star Wars. And they're like, well, have you ever seen the movie that's between Star Wars and Empire? And I said, there is no movie between Star Wars and Empire. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh no, man, you gotta check this out. And it was like a thing that, I mean, you never saw, like Lucas bought up all the copies and television rights. You couldn't find it anywhere. There was no YouTube back then.
He pulled a Jedi mind track. He tried to pre-internet. There is no holiday special.
I'm telling you, the only reason why that Lego holiday special came out was so that way they could defeat the SEO.
Yes.
So when you now search Star Wars holiday special, that Lego version comes out.
And people are like, it was terrible. They're like, what are you talking about? It's amazing. I just watched it. It was a fantastic Lego show.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh man, I mean, if anybody's seen it, it's like one of the worst things ever made. I mean, in that way that they used to just slap anything onto television, and it was like Battle of the Network Stars bad. Like, I mean, just a mess. Like B. Arthur's in it. Art Carney's in it.
Oh my God.
It's like all these like random people just show up and they're in the Star Wars universe now. And then Carrie Fisher has to sing a song to the tune of Star Wars, if I'm right. She has to sing a song about Life Day, and then Chewie walks out in this like crazy robe. I mean, it's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. It's the one property that's like, that didn't exist. Memory erase, Mandela effect. That didn't happen. Oh my gosh. But see, look, we're already jumping into this here, but yeah, like, we got to do a whole episode, I think, on parodies.
I agree. I wrote that down. Parodies, other people like us, because that would be fun to do. I'm sure there's a bunch more. Yeah. We could like make it like a running mini series of parodies. Just like, okay, this week we're doing, Blue Harvest. This week we're doing, or this next time we do another one like that, or Spaceballs. I mean, Spaceballs would be just, oh god, like just there's like, I think that's like a running. We'd have to do that either like 3 or 4 parts. We'd have to do like a watch party. I think we'd almost have to move over to Facebook or something and do like a watch party of Spaceballs to just do commentary, or like a pre-recorded version where you and I do commentary and edit it to be a little shorter. That's the same number on my luggage.
Oh no, it's the same number. It's the same combination on my luggage. I mean, when they're out there combing the desert,
oh my god, the final comb, the last comb. They found shit.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Okay, I just
oh no, seriously. But you know what? Also, and again, I'm sorry. We're not on topic here. We're not on Star Wars in the news, which is what we're supposed to be talking about.
We're making.
But
news.
I will.
No, I don't know.
We're making the news right now. So another thing that I think, and Jeff, I know that we're having a green room discussion come into the podcast. But I honestly, anybody that's listening to the show right now, watching the show, we'd love to have your suggestions on this. There's also a really fun thing outside of parodies, Jeff, and it's always exciting because every week we come in here and we talk about Star Wars, and tonight we're going to be talking about Star Wars in the news. But back when Star Wars came out, like back in '77, what happened is that everybody was like, gotta get to space. We have got to make these space movies, and that's why Star Trek, the motion picture, came out, which is the anti-Star Wars movie. It's like the slow. It's not Star Trek the motion picture. It's Star Trek the slow motion picture. It's like it's the slowest movie of all time. But there was all of these like crazy, like insane space movies that came out, like Flash Gordon, which is like nutso. I mean, Dino De Laurentiis was like, we're going to make our own version of Star Wars. We're going to have the Birdmen. We're going to have Brian Blessed, who also has a Star Wars connection because he plays Boss Nass in episode 1, yelling, dive. All of that is great. But then there were terrible movies, like even worse movies. Like Flash Gordon is like a guilty pleasure, but like, yeah, no. I'll let it pass. It's got some pretty good actors. Then it's got Timothy Dalton in it. It's got that Max von Sydow.
Oh, dude,
I mean,
yes.
it's some solid production.
Yeah.
But then there's like terrible movies like Adventures in the Forbidden Zone or Ice Pirates. These are horrible movies. And then there's also there's also Star Wars knockoffs. Like you can go and find, it's like Star Crash.
I think you told me about that.
Yeah, Italian Star Wars.
Dude, there's so many. There's like what? I don't know
so
if this
great.
is what Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai and the 8th Dimension. Across the 8th Dimension. I mean, it's terrible and awesome at I mean, you don't even have to watch the movie. Just watch the trailer for the movie on YouTube, and it will like just blow your mind. It's I don't know how you make a movie like that, but they did, and it's there.
It's got my favorite. It's got my favorite piece of advice in it. What is it? Peter Weir, who is RoboCop.
Yep.
Is
and now a history professor. Now he's a history professor.
Also in Star Trek Into Darkness. Yes. He is. He's Admiral Marcus. He is again, we're gonna eventually get to this topic here on Star Wars in the news. But he plays Buckaroo Banzai, who's like, if you were to take Doctor Who, first reference to Doctor Who on the show, if you were to take Doctor Who and then merge it with like a scientist rock star, you get Buckaroo Banzai. And he has one of my favorite lines in any movie, which is, he says, remember, wherever you go, there you are. It's like the most crazy rhetorical sentence ever. And yeah, it's meant to like blow your mind. Wherever you go, there you are. Yeah, it's so great. All those movies that came out then are crazy nuts. All the knockoffs that came out. I know we talked about Italian Star Wars, but Italian Star Wars is for those of you who don't know, it's a movie called Star Crash. It has Christopher Plummer in it.
Really?
Yeah, Christopher Plummer is the king of or I think he's the president of space. I'm not joking around. It's something like that. That's his title. And he's there in this movie. And the way that they shot it was, they knew that Star Wars was really big, and so they said, we're going to make our own Star Wars. And so they hadn't seen the movie, so they sent some guy to get the novelization of Star Wars, and then someone came back and made that they translated the novel of Star Wars into a movie, and it's kind of like if you were to play a game of telephone around the world, and you're describing the plot of Star Wars, and then someone's like, "Yeah, now I'm gonna make it. Now you try it."
Wait,
it's insane.
Didn't Zaphod Beeblebrox already have the title of like President of Space or the Galaxy or something from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I'm like, someone's already claimed that title, right?
Oh yeah. Doug Adams had a lawsuit there. Like, I mean, seriously, there is a that episode. I'm sorry, that movie is like the wildest thing I've ever seen. People are wearing what looks like literal garbage bags, and it's like, that's space clothes. It's
You're like, because it's space. I mean,
man, space, man. It's space.
You gotta do weird things in space.
Yeah. I just love how they were like, we're just gonna get it out into theaters, and people they love space. Just get it out. And that and Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, which is also and Ice Pirates. All those movies.
The Last
are just
Starfighter,
like insane.
The Last Starfighter.
Oh my gosh, The Last Starfighter.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
I've tried watching it here recently. It was like streaming on Disney or something like that as a special, or I don't remember where it was. I was watching it, I'm like, this is really terrible, and I'm totally gonna watch the whole thing.
The Last Starfighter is like, it's I feel like you could make a really cool version of that now.
Yes.
Because now you've got people that are playing video games online, or you got people that are playing video games on, these awesome devices. And spoilers for a 30-year-old movie, The Last Starfighter is about a guy who goes to a arcade and plays this game, and he gets the highest score, and that's actually a test for these aliens that are looking for a starfighter. And it's one of my it's another guilty pleasure. Like, growing up with those movies, it's hard to get away from them. I mean, they're
there's like a very meta reference between The Last Starfighter and Tron, the original Tron. Like how one you get sucked into a game, one you get sucked into space, but either way you're getting sucked into something to go do something you weren't expecting to do, related to an arcade game. I mean, I actually, speaking of Tron, I actually rewatched the recent version of Tron that came out, and there's some parts of it that I'm like, this is a little but actually I really enjoy the movie. Like, they did a really good job, like, continuing that story in a very interesting way, at least in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I was a fan of that sequel. I was hoping that it would. I was hoping they were going to go somewhere with that, but it was fine. But yeah, there was a time there where they were kind of resurrecting all of these things. I see Rich's comment here. Speaking of other movies, I mean, we're gonna get to Star Wars in the news. I swear we're going to do that. I'm more than happy to talk about this new Dune movie too.
This looks amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, Dune's also one of those things that was Star Wars inspired. Gosh, we could change the title to Things That Star Wars Inspired.
Writing that down right now.
You have this time where Star Wars comes out, and everybody's thinking, oh man, like, we got to get our thing out. We got to get our space movie out. And Dino De Laurentiis has, I want to say they own the rights to Dune. And they knew that George Lucas was inspired by Dune. And then there's this director war, because George Lucas wants David Lynch to film Return of the Jedi, which would have been probably the grossest version of Return of the Jedi. And there would have been weird doppelgangers and stuff. Like David Lynch is all about that doppelganger. And but what's really cool is David Lynch was like, no, I'm not going to do Return of the Jedi. Give it to somebody else. I'm going to go do Dune. And man, if that movie, the original one, is like crazy, it's flawed, but oh my gosh, like, there are parts of that movie that are just like insanely good.
So okay, funny story, and this is not Star Wars news, but since we're talking Dune, I didn't know that when I was a kid. I didn't know that Dune was a book, and I didn't know there was a movie. What I knew is there was a PC game called Dune. And we played it, or like something of Arrakis, what I think was, I forget what the name of the actual game was. Maybe it was Dune. And my buddy right next door to me had a, you'll love this. It was a Packard Bell Pentium 133 And we had
wow, he was rolling. He was really rolling then. Like, I mean, that's
actually, like a year, like
that's high speed there.
Yes, 6 months after he got it, my parents finally got me a computer for like schoolwork and things like that. And I got, wait for it, a Dell. No, it was not a Dell. It was like a knockoff brand from some local computer store when that was actually a thing that people did, is built their own computers to sell. It was a Pentium 166 with MMX. I still have no idea what the hell MMX was supposed to do, but it was a Pentium 166. I'm like, ha, I have a 166 and you have a 133. And anyway, so we played Dune on his computer, and I remember we played Dune. I didn't know what it was, but this RTS, I'd never played an RTS before, having to avoid, crap, a sandworm got your part of your base again. And then one day he's like, dude, you want to watch the movie? I'm like, what movie? Dune. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, there's a movie. This was actually inspired from the movie. I'm like, what? And he puts it on, and I was sitting in the room going, oh, what the hell am I watching? And the movie was great. The parts that always like got me were anytime they went to Harkonnen, and any scenes with Baron Harkonnen, I was like,
oh yeah,
this guy is grossing me out. Why is he on screen? I don't understand why he's floating with pustules. It's
Oh no, I'm telling you, Return of the Jedi, like that would have been Jabba. You know what I mean? Like,
oh god, yes,
he would have just 100% kind of leaned in to this, I feel like, and made Jedi like super gross. Which, I mean, honestly, I know that was kind of the idea of like, oh wow, like Jabba's palace is like the underworld, and Joanna, I know, is on here. Joanna's a Kessel Chat all-star, and has been on the show with us to talk about mythology, and we haven't yet talked about how that journey through Jabba's palace is like Orpheus going into the underworld.
Yes.
But David Lynch would have just, I feel like, made that awesome. But I don't know if it's Dino De Laurentiis or what was going on with that film production, but both Dune and Flash Gordon, both of those are they have like rock bands doing the scores. So like Queen does the score for Flash, and Toto does the score for Dune.
Really?
And
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, the Flash score is like bar none. Like, if
it's like the epitome of Freddie Mercury's voice when you hear that intro song. It just is.
Legit, if I was in a professional wrestling circle and I needed a walk-on music, it's Flash. Because man, there's nothing better. And then the Toto version for Dune. Oh my gosh, is that like legit like great. Like Toto really like brings so much there, and then they like have this prophecy theme that's going on. So I want to answer Rich's question though, because I think it's so cool that that Rich brought this up, because I feel like it's got Star Wars' DNA is inside of Dune. You don't get Tatooine without Arrakis.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get these you don't get so many stories. Paul Atreides shares a lot with Luke Skywalker. I am okay. One, I know there's a lot of haters out there about this Dune movie, and I know that there's a lot of love for the old Dune movie. I am someone who loves the old Dune movie. I have all of the various versions of it, the various cuts that they made of the original Dune. I love that. I love that movie. I love the book. It is an amazing book. But it is. I am not one of these haters on this new movie. The director of this is took another property that I love and did something great with it. His name is Denis. I'm Denis Villeneuve. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but he did Blade Runner 2049, and which was amazing. And he's got such a visual style. He did He did Arrival, which is a thinking person's sci-fi movie, because it's a movie about communication. Like if aliens did come here, it's not just going to be Independence Day style, let's go and shoot them up. It's going to be, how do we communicate with them? But I'd love to hear, Jeff, your thoughts on this trailer. When I saw the teaser, when I saw the other trailer, I loved it. I'd love to hear what you think.
I need to rewatch it a couple more times. and I haven't seen the original Dune movie in a long time, so great. Take this with a bit of a grain of salt. But when I watched the trailer for the new movie, I was just pulling it up a second ago because I wanted to see some details. When I watched the trailer for the new movie, I'm excited about it because it feels more. How do I say this? I want to say it feels more raw, but that's not quite what I mean because the original movie had a very raw feel to it. My problem with the way, if I was to say it was a problem, the way that the original movie was filmed in that raw sense, to me, almost felt low budget, not raw. And nothing against low budget, that's fine. It was just, it had a sense of like, it was raw because they didn't have the money or the space to put things in that would have completed some parts of the film and the sets and all that type of stuff. And in this new movie, this new movie feels, or at least from the trailers, feels like if you were to do that again, but you could complete a lot of stuff. And like, for example, the sandworms. Sandworms looked amazing in the original movie too, but this one, they look more ominous. And I like that because you don't see, it's almost like when you finally see in the episode of The Mandalorian, when you finally see the crate dragon, like for the while you don't see the crate dragon at all, and when you finally do, it's like, oh my god, this thing is freaky. But it's almost scarier when you don't see it because your imagination has to figure out what the heck am I looking at. And so kind of seeing the scenes with the sandworm in the trailer actually kind of freaked me out more because it looks more amorphous, like it's a blob. You can't tell what this thing actually is, but it's freaking huge and they're clearly scared of it. And that's one semantic, but I kind of like that because it leaves a little bit more to the imagination. Whereas I feel like in the original movie from like, it was 1984, I think it felt like they gave us too much of the detail, and almost some of that detail could have been left alone and feel a little more mysterious. It wouldn't have completed things. It almost felt like it had the problem that so many people say they want but doesn't really work, which is trying to take a novelization and make it completely real and true to form in a film. It doesn't it actually doesn't work because when you do that, it was those subtleties in the book that your mind can infer, but when you try to physically put that on screen, it's like, well, my imagination's not there anymore. You've just told me what it is. I can't imagine it, so there's no mystery to it anymore. And that in the story in a book works really well when you tell a story that way, because people just pour themselves. You don't even have to say the words, but a person will just pour themselves into that scene, and that's what makes it more intense for them. When you put it on screen and you're like, no, we're going to tell you because you should describe it and put that exactly on screen. Well, the problem with that is it was that filling in of the description as a person into the story that made it feel more complete. By physically completing it yourself, you're now making me have to see it your way. And if I don't see it your way, then you've almost taken me out of the moment. And I feel like there's the scene, I forget the creature it's called, but there was the scene in the original movie where they all go to like this big conference and in a room, this big sled slides out and then the doors open, there's a massive worm.
The navigator. The navigator shows up.
Like when they showed that, I was almost like, you could have left that more like cloudy and amorphous, and that there's something in there but I can't tell, and it makes it feel more vague and like intriguing. But you showed me every part of it, and I'm like, I mean, cool, but it's a big space slug. Great. Like I don't feel an impact from watching this on screen.
Yeah, I mean, that's also David Lynch's style. Like that's why I think I've seen people do this. I feel like we could make a whole episode of the David Lynch Return of the Jedi, just like we did with the discussion about the Duel of the Fates, episode 9, the version of Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates. There's a lot of movies that could have been, and man, those are things where it's like, I'd love to sit down and like, man, like, well, what would that have been like? I would have loved to have seen, it would have been nuts, but I would love to have seen David Lynch's Return of the Jedi. But David Lynch was also a guy that was like, I'm going to put it on the frame. I don't want you to imagine. And it's funny because sometimes budget limitations make for a really great scene. And a really good example is like an Empire. The ice monster wasn't working. Why am I blanking on this? The Wampa. Wampa wasn't working. And so they were like, okay, well, what is working? And they were like, we got this really great claw. And they're like, really? We got the claw and we got the face, and that's about it. That's all that's working. And so then what they did when Luke is knocked out by the Wampa and he's hanging upside down when he comes back, he's knocked unconscious, wakes back up. He's hanging upside down. And the threat that they do is the sound of the growl, the music, and him walking. And then the music's getting higher and higher, and the focus is exclusively on Luke trying to get the lightsaber out in time. And they went back in the special edition and they were like, no, I want to show the monster. That's fine, and I think it was fine, but I actually preferred it the other way. And that's kind of like the David Lynch of it all. David Lynch is always like, I'm going to show the monster. In Dune, I'm going to show the hand, like he's got his hand in the box, where he's got to, he's got to say to himself, fear is the mind killer, and you get to see his hand in the box, and it's like disintegrating, and it's like, you don't really need to do that. You can just trust the actor that the actor is gonna respond. But I'm really excited about this new Dune movie. It's got an amazing cast, from the casting of Paul Atreides and Chana, and I think the characters of Chana, to the parents, the Duke Atreides, his wife, who's played by I could actually name the actors, I think, even faster than I can name all the characters, because these Oscar Isaac, Rebecca Ferguson, these are some of my favorite actors, and they're just amazing. And I love the look of some of these planets. And again, like Dune, Star Wars' DNA is locked irrevocably into Dune. You don't get a desert planet. You don't get a planet that's covered in water. You don't get a lot of these things without Dune. And even the word spice. They talk about how Han Solo, or the spice mines in Kessel. Right. And they talk in Solo about spice, and they talk about how Poe Dameron was a spice smuggler. All that reference to spice, all that is Dune. Because the spice must flow in Dune. So again, I'm really excited to see this movie. I love really great science fiction. There's two things I'm really excited about. This Dune movie, and also Foundation. Which is another great piece of science fiction, and like Dune, nearly unfilmable. So yeah. Again, Jeff, we could talk about this all night. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and I think Rich just kind of called us out. So nicely done, Rich. Nicely done. Way to keep us on track.
Done. Although, Rich, I'm happy to talk about Valerian. What should have been called Valerian and Laureline. Happy in the future episode to talk about that. Oddly, they went with Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I don't understand that. They should have just called it what the comic book was called, which was Valerian and Laureline. So
yeah. Let's do that. And I did not know it was a comic. I need to go find those comics now. I will do that.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah.
So
really cool comic.
On to the news. What's our first story?
The news.
What's our first story?
I'm not gonna jump out, and I think we should go with the story that you had found, which is a huge casting report.
Oh, yes.
For the new Ahsoka show. I've got this here on my notes. Please, if you want to take it from here.
Yes, dude, I am so excited about this. So there's so many great things to talk about. So, as everyone probably knows, or hopefully you know, they are in the midst of, I think principal photography is either underway or has finished for the live-action Ahsoka show, a spin-off of The Mandalorian featuring Ahsoka Tano, played by Rosario Dawson. So that'll be fantastic. And it takes place after the events of what we've already seen, but it still takes place in the same timeline as The Mandalorian. So it's happening alongside the other activities of The Mandalorian. So it's not some jump in the future. It's not jump in the past. It's the same time frame. So basically, it'll continue. Her story continues where she left off from that episode that Din Djarin met her in. Her story is continuing. And the drop there was when she's fighting approaching the magistrate of that town. She asks her, I want to know where your master is. I'm looking for Thrawn. And we're all like, Oh, Grand Admiral Thrawn. First drop in non-animated stuff for Star Wars. So he's been in the Clone Wars. He was in Timothy Zahn's book way back when. He's been in, God, what, 2 other trilogies in the 3rd book in this final trilogy is coming out like in a month. So like the character's just been everywhere. And so for the live action show, they finally confirmed, or they had confirmation that was put out there by somebody, either Rosario or others, that both Ezra Bridger and Thrawn will make an appearance and will likely be the primary storyline for Ahsoka. She is trying to find Ezra. And if you've watched Star Wars Rebels, it culminates in a number of things, but one of them is that Ezra finally comes into his force powers and he uses some Purrgil, basically space whales, to jump into hyperspace with Thrawn in tow on his Star Destroyer to get them out of there and save Lothal. Sorry to spoil that. I apologize. And so the end of the show, there's a kind of a monologue from Sabine Wren, and she talks about where everyone kind of went when all the rebels kind of went off to and what they're doing. And in that, she says her and Ahsoka leave to try to go find Ezra. And so what we pick up is Ahsoka's on the trail looking for Ezra still. So that's where we're at now. And we get a hint that it's many years later, obviously, since Rebels has stopped, and she's still actively looking for him. It sounds like we just don't know how. What we don't know right now is the distance in time between when Rebels ends and where that episode where Ahsoka's featured in The Mandalorian. We don't know that primarily because when Rebels ends, the scene, what finally ends the show before there's a jump in time to Lothal prospering, we don't know what that gap in time is. Maybe it's documented, maybe I've missed it, but it's some period of time in the future. Ahsoka's older, etc. Anyway, the news is they've announced that both Ezra and Thrawn are the primaries they're looking for, and they finally announced the casting. So the cool part about this, we'll start with Thrawn, because I actually want to bury the lead a little bit here. This is an awesome choice. So they've selected Lars Mikkelsen to play Thrawn in the live action, and many people know him for a variety of reasons. But one of the cool parts about his character, or him as an actor, is he voiced Thrawn back in the Clone Wars. Was it the Clone Wars? No, it wasn't the Clone Wars. It was. Oh,
it was Rebels.
It was in Rebels. It was in Rebels.
So
when they brought Thrawn into canon in Star Wars Rebels, the animated series, Lars Mikkelsen voiced him in that. What I don't know is if he was voiced by Lars in any of the audiobooks. That would be interesting to find out too. But he was definitely the voice actor for Thrawn in Rebels, the TV series, or the animated series. And so they've casted him to play Thrawn live action, which I think is amazing. He's actually the older brother of Mads Mikkelsen, who we know as Galen Erso from Star Wars Rogue One. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which is a really cool thing. He's a great voice actor. I think he's going to play him phenomenally. And now that we've heard his voice and he can maintain that smooth cadence that Thrawn has when he speaks, I think he's going to do a really good job. The one that I'm actually really excited about is, I'm probably going to butcher his name, and so I sincerely apologize, but I think it's Mena Massoud, I think is his name. He's known most recently for playing Aladdin in the live action version of the movie put out by Disney. I think that's actually like his first major motion picture, I think. I may be wrong, but I think it's his first major spot on the scene. I'm happy about this pick for a couple of reasons. One, I think Aladdin's actually kind of an underrated movie. We watched it recently with our son. I was a little like, I'm not sure. The Will Smith playing the genie. I'm like, this feels like blue skin. It's gonna be a little strange. They actually did it pretty well. Like I think they actually did a pretty good job with what they had, and I think Will Smith plays the genie's character really well. Kind of trying to come off the heels of Robin Williams is a tough thing to do, but Mena did a fantastic job playing Aladdin. I mean, sing, dance, all those things, but he acted it really well, didn't overdo it, didn't try to overdo it. I think he actually did a really good job for the style of movie that is. He did a good job in general, and specifically for the style of movie he was playing. I shouldn't discount it at all. I'm excited about this also because there has been a tendency, and this is part of another topic, another story we're going to get to, there's been a tendency in Star Wars and in a lot of other franchises for a long time to whitewash things. So most of the actors are white. That's not okay. It's just not okay. And so I'm really happy to see that they've casted somebody of color to play Ezra, because he is a person of color. The character is in Rebels. And I think it's actually sort of a good sign that there's Lucasfilm and the others are trying to correct for some past mistakes, even recent mistakes, because even the very first episode of The Bad Batch, featuring when Kanan Jarrus shows up, the first time we ever meet him as a kid, and he interacts with the Bad Batch, etc., and his master's there, Depa Billab's there. Kanan is a person of color. It was said to be a person of color. I learned that a while back. In Rebels, But even people were frustrated because he was actually made to be a little bit more white in the Rebels series, even though he was supposed to be a person of color. So there's a lot of frustration, rightly so. And so I'm really happy to see them actually cast a person of color in the role of Ezra, live action, so that there's no mistaking that his character is a person of color. He should be, and that's how we should portray him on screen. And I don't mean to overuse the phrase person of color. I apologize for doing that, but I didn't have a better way to say it. But it makes me really content to see that is happening. I don't want to say, okay, good, Lucasfilm, fantastic, you're all set, you're good to go. That's not true. I just think it's a good step in the right direction of acknowledging that, no, we need to cast appropriately for the characters we're writing and that we're depicting in other places. Let's cast the way they should be cast. Good actors and the person who represents the character exactly the way they've been displayed already. I think it's a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that too, I know this actor's been in the news a couple of years ago, actually right after Aladdin came out, because Aladdin was one of the biggest movies that year. Huge.
Really?
Made a lot of money for Disney, did really, really well. And I remember him because he came on one of the talk shows and said, I can't get another job. And I'm in one of the biggest movies in theaters at the time. And even with all the blue Will Smith backlash, where it's like, granted, there is a moment there where it crosses into that uncanny valley because he's so blue. It's like he's got that the way that they did the genie effect. I agree with you, Jeff. I've seen the movie. It was only in that trailer that I really feel like it kind of stuck out.
Yeah.
But it was making a lot of money, and this actor could not get another job. And so I'm glad to see that he's because he's a talented actor, that he's able to get this work. And I also think that that's the beauty of an animated series that's set in a galaxy far, far away, is that it's like, I remember when people were upset when Diego Luna was cast as Cassian Andor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got an accent, and I don't understand why that. I remember people saying that. I don't understand how he has that accent in the Star Wars galaxy. And it's like, no one complained when it was a British accent. No one batted an eye at Grand Moff Tarkin kind of speaking with a high aristocratic accent, or when Admiral Piet is speaking with a British accent. No one said anything twice. But so that's why it's like, I love seeing that kind of representation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it speaks volumes. And as someone who looks for that representation and looks for it with my family, it says a lot to us and to people that are looking for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that casting. I 100% agree.
Yeah, and I think this is actually a really good segue into
Yep.
the other story on Carl Sagan, if you want to pick that one up, because I think that's actually a really good tangent to this.
Oh yeah. So this is one of the things I love about social media. And I don't like a lot of it. But there's one thing that I really like. It's when stuff comes back that you might have never seen before. And sometimes it's like it's crazy stuff, like it might be a video or a thing from like the 1960s or the 1970s, and it's something that's like on YouTube that people are sharing and getting out there. And this is one of those moments where a thing that I never knew existed popped up on the internet. And it's Carl Sagan, and it happened about 2 weeks ago. And I'm sure probably everybody has seen this now because it went viral like overnight. And it's Carl Sagan on the Johnny Carson show, on the Tonight Show. And I'm probably dating myself. I don't remember when Johnny Carson was on the Tonight Show. And so Johnny Carson is hosting the Tonight Show, and he invites Carl Sagan on. Now, I obviously have no memory of this happening, and I was amazed that this is something that came up then. it's in the early 70s or the early 80s. It's like, I'm sorry, the late 70s, early 80s. And here is Carl Sagan, this guy who is, known for his PBS specials, who is an advocate for the search for extraterrestrial life. He's a believer in science. He is doing all of this work. He brings up a young Neil deGrasse Tyson into the ranks of scientists. I mean, there's all of these things that he's doing, and he's just at the forefront of science and thoughts about space and where we should be investing our money. And so now he's on Johnny Carson, and I think this was meant to be like a softball question. He's asked about Star Wars, like, what do you think about Star Wars?
Clearly, they had not done any research on Carl Sagan at all.
No, and I think they thought it was just going to be a fun question, because it's like, oh, hey, Carl Sagan, you like space. Here's a movie where stars is in the title. So it's like, yeah, like Carl Sagan, you probably have something to say about this. And it's legit when people talk about things like, I don't know, things being woke, something being woke, or whatever you want to say. And it's such a new thing. It's not new. It's been around for a while. And Carl Sagan, this video is kind of evidence of that, because Carl Sagan's answer is one about, first, a scientific one, and then a very political statement. Because Jeff, and I know that you've seen this too, and it's legit one of my favorite things, is that first he talks about how crazy it is that we would think in another galaxy that things would look like us. Because he talks all about how he's like, evolution, the way that it works, like, we're just the thing. It's not like evolution works backwards from that. We want to get to a human with 5 fingers and 5 toes, 10 fingers and 10 toes, and 2 eyes and all this other stuff. He's like, we don't work from the backwards out. We're the life that evolved on this planet because we were the ones that were best suited for survival. And that's why we look the way that we do. That's why this all works
almost
out.
Conveniently forgetting that there were many, many, many other species that existed on the planet a long period of time before we ever did. And it took a long time to get to a place where it was evolution figured out that we're the one. Yeah.
Yep.
It reminds me over a little bit.
Oh, no, totally. It reminds me, honestly, of a couple of great Star Trek episodes, Star Trek Voyager, Distant Origin, which I totally would recommend because it's about life evolving on Earth differently. But it is one of these things that he's talking about how weird it is for him to see, because Star Wars set in a galaxy far, far away, long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. And he takes it literally. And he's like, weird that a life would look like us. So let's park that over here. That's the first thing he says, is he talks about the hubris of that.
Yeah.
And again, he's looking at it from a scientist's point of view. He's not a film critic. He's just looking at a scientist's point of view. And then he really leans into how white Star Wars, especially the original Star Wars, was. And he's like, not only, and he even says it to Johnny Carson. He says, not only is it the hubris of us thinking that all the life in another galaxy must look like us. He says the people in charge look like us. And then he says to Johnny Carson, and Johnny, they look exactly like you and I. And he starts talking about, and he does exactly what you're saying. I'm sorry, I just wanted to add in, like, when you watch it, he says the words and he's doing this. He's like, well, they look like us. Yes.
So he's making it very obvious. He says white. He does say that, but like, he makes it in his body actions. It's not just his words, but his bodily actions, his body language are telling you that he is uncomfortable with the concepts he's talking about, because it makes him, to me, it feels like we are seeing the manifestation of his emotions. He is not happy with the fact that he has to say this out loud, because it is true.
Yeah. And he's also having to say it out loud on network television to an audience might not be ready for that. But if anything, and by the way, like if there is someone watching this right now and you love Star Wars, this isn't anything, this is a legitimate critique of Star Wars, and in fact one that they really tried to address even as early as the next movie, and even in Return of the Jedi, where you have a greater diversity of that cast. Still no women as pilots of any of these rebel fighters, but nonetheless, they started to immediately try to address that in the successive movies. But the thing that I think is important to recognize here is Carl Sagan is one of these guys that, man, I love Carl Sagan. His there is a great YouTube video, and Jeff, you might have seen it. It's where someone made a commercial for NASA, and it's called the Blue Marble, and it's film set against a speech that Carl Sagan is giving in one of the PBS specials, which of course, yeah, Cosmos, it's that. And it ends in this amazing way, with our species safely arrayed across multiple star systems. Our people of the future will look back at our planet. They'll think of how many roads had to be crossed, how many roads were traveled, how long it was, how many rivers had to be crossed to get to here. And he is such an inspiration for humanity. And so I think that when he's reviewing Star Wars, it's not just as a scientist, it's as like a humanist. And so when people talk about things like atheism in science, or a lack of faith or things in science, oh my gosh, he is he's talking about a faith in humans that we don't have yet. When Carl Sagan talks about things like the people of our future will have more of our strengths and less of our weaknesses, that's something that I look for and hope for too. And so I don't mean to get too deep into this, but it's a deep subject that Carl Sagan's bringing up here. And so I love that this came up in YouTube again. I love that that people were able to see that this was a topic even back in the late 70s, and that this has always been something that Star Wars has had to deal with. I'm sorry, Jeff, I've talked a lot on this.
No, I'm glad you did. It's an emotional subject, I think, for both of us, for similar and different reasons. Everything you said, everything you said is, just everything you said. The one thing that came to mind for me was, the one additional thing that came to mind for me was, I was trying to find, I wasn't like trying to find a positivity in what he was saying. It wasn't that. I was trying to think to myself, like, if I could make this, if I could give Lucas a little bit more some credit, and I'm not trying to. This is not meant to discount anything that happened, but if I could give him, if I give him some credit, whether he intended it or not, one thing I can say that I think this does have a somewhat similar silver-ish lining to it, is that it could be seen as very allegorical to where we're at now, which is most leadership in most countries across the globe are white. And so when you look at this, when you look at the story and you look at the Empire is portrayed as evil. And in this, they are pretty much objectively evil, or almost like Nazi Germany to a point where the leadership is on board and they understand the people who work there, they're just part of the Navy and they're just got a job and they got health benefits and whatever else. But they don't really, the dogma is not their thing. It's just, I needed a job and I was conscripted or whatever else. And so I when I was thinking about this, I'm like, if they meant it as sort of writing the Empire or the Imperial leaders as allegorical, then okay, like, make it obvious, say that, embrace it and accept it, and say that was intentional and we're making it very poignant. Then what you can do is embrace the things that we have in, like, extended universe or now Legends, that Palpatine thought and has been written about, where he despised non-human species. Like he wouldn't even let them in the military of any way, shape, or form. The fact that Thrawn was there in all of the books that were written post. Why am I blanking on the name? The original series that had Thrawn in it. What is it called?
Is it Timothy Zahn's series?
Yes, I kept blanking on the name of it. Anyway, so
go ahead.
No, what was it? Do you remember the name?
Is it the why am I thinking it's the Era of the Empire?
Era of the Empire. Yes. Yep. We got it at the same time. Okay, cool. So the series after that, the series after that Timothy Zahn wrote again like 4 or 5 years ago, and he did another trilogy. It starts off with they meet Thrawn, they find him, and he was done there on purpose, and he comes up through the ranks of the military. But it is a constant theme in that book of addressing the fact that he's a non-human making his way up the ranks, and people hate it. Many people in the military absolutely hate that he is able to do that. The Emperor lets it happen in his specific case because of very specific things the Emperor is getting from him in return. But in any other case, aliens do not make their way through the Imperial Navy. They don't show up in the First Order. None of those things. Yep. And so from that perspective, I think that's a good thing, because if it's purely maintained that way for the Empire only, just the Imperial like military forces, then we can say that this is allegorical, and we're really trying to demonstrate what happens when eugenics and these other things are taken, like put into place, and dogmas against other, like dictatorial rule over other peoples or come about. Like it can represent a lot of things that are really negative, and it does a really good job of that. The problem is, I don't think that was actually what was intended. I think it probably what was much more likely, and I'm not going to beat him up for this because it was kind of unfortunately the way things were at that time, but at this point, things should be different now, and we should make sure things are different now. He can't fix what happened back then, but I think it's a really telling thing. And listening to him talk, I even saw Johnny Carson getting uncomfortable with his answers from on stage, and I'm like, good. I watched this, I'm like, you should be uncomfortable, because Sagan is saying the things that nobody else wants to talk about and nobody really wants to hear. But yeah, it's for anyone out there who says, well, this is just how things were. No, they weren't. People just didn't feel comfortable talking about them for what, any number of reasons. But it's not like these issues and the feelings about those issues didn't exist at that time. They totally did, but people didn't feel like in common culture they could actually speak up and say them. And Sagan was one of those people. Thankfully, unfortunately, there were not nearly as many of him, white and non-white people, that felt like they could actually say this stuff out loud, and massive repercussions wouldn't come back to them. So it's. And there's a lot of other elements too where you could say, well, they're filming in England, and they're just trying to cast as many extras as they can, but there were a lot of other actor choices that they could have went with, and I'm really I'm glad that Billy D. Williams is in Empire Strikes Back. I'm glad that they have more underrepresented peoples who are pilots of X-wing fighters and Y-wing fighters and A-wing fighters, and they're suddenly just filling up the ranks of the Rebel Alliance. I will also say that in Empire, Irvin Kershner went the Spartacus route and was like, oh, from this point forward, I want all of the Empire to be British, and I want all of the rebels to be Americans. And because he thought, it's just like Spartacus, that'll be a subtle reminder to the audience that there's this division between the Empire and the rebels, which he cast it as the British Empire and the American rebels. And one of them is trying to fight for freedom. And I'm sure everybody can remember I'm now killing this joke, the Tatooine Tea Party. So anyway, a good movie though that took a bunch of risks, comes out 2 years after Star Wars, takes all the risks, and it's Alien. Alien is put together. Dan O'Bannon writes Alien. It's got a terrible title originally. I think it's Star Beast. And then they decide, they're like, no, I think we could call it Alien. So they filmed that also in London, and it's Ridley Scott who is based there for all of his filming. And what's really cool is
they originally hired Tom Skerritt, underrated actor, to be Ripley. And at the last minute, they put Sigourney Weaver into that role. They also have Yaphet Kotto, who is added to that cast. And in fact, if I'm right, Yaphet Kotto is the highest paid actor in that movie. And by the way, delivers like one of his best performances, like an amazing performance, and most of it is just like ad-libbed. He's not even like reading the script, was just like not there. I mean, there's some amazing people that's in that that are in that movie. Ian Holm is in that movie. Of course, I'm blanking on the associate engineer who's in that. There's all of these amazing people that are in Alien, but they're taking massive risks.
John Hurt's in that movie, isn't he?
Oh my gosh, John Hurt is in there, and he showed up without any preparation because the guy who was originally playing the role of Kane had appendicitis like that when they were filming and had to leave, or some other crazy medical emergency. I'm gonna just say it's appendicitis. But it's amazing that John Hurt just comes in and is just perfect for this role.
Oh, but yeah, so much so.
But all of this is leading to some of the final people that are alive at the end of this movie are Ripley and Yaphet Kotto. And Ripley is an amazing character, and was, of course, not written for a man or a woman, just Ripley. Ripley didn't even have a name until like Aliens, where she's Ellen Ripley, but she's just Ripley. And it's an amazing story. Dan O'Bannon did a great job writing it. But they took a risk. They took some big risks in that casting, and really brought in more underrepresented peoples to not just be your hero, but to be a part of this like regular ragtag bunch that just comes across, as Dan O'Bannon terribly said, a star beast. And yeah, it's a great example of what you can do, even if you're filming in another country, to really find ways to bring in different representation in a movie. So yeah, it can be done even then.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, listen, I know we have a bunch more stories to get to, but we're about out of time, I think, for this stream. And we've got so much more to talk about. So I think we'll put a pause on the news stuff and we'll pick it up next time or at a future show here soon, because there's some really good stories we wanted to go through.
Yeah.
So, Joanna, Rich, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I realized what time it was, and I'm like, oh shoot, how do we end these things? I forget how we end these things. We're usually like already like this rant. We just like concluded a story, and we're like, this is like an actual break. I don't know how we're supposed to end at this point. But yeah, this was good. We've actually got some pretty cool stuff coming up, and I think we're gonna try to do a another show with Brandon, who was on recently, but we're going to do something separate. We were talking about this as doing like a book review. So we may actually be moving over to doing an episode or something with him on Instagram and do a live stream with him and talk about one of the recent books that was coming out of the High Republic. So we'll do that. So we'll do that. Yeah. And then, we're still working on the other YouTube channel. That's a work in progress. That'll probably be a little bit more time. But yeah, anything else you want to leave them with? Right.
I'll just say this. It's always great to see some of our regular guests. Joanna, we're really excited. Whenever you have the time, we'd be happy to have you come back onto the show, because I feel like there is so much more we can cover in the mythology area. So really excited to see you here as a listening, but can't wait to have you back as a guest. Always good to see Rich. And we'll talk about Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets in the future. I'll just say this on the channel. Jeff and I are really excited about this new channel, because we're also going to be building kind of like mini-sodes of small little bits of content that we're looking to drop in. So if you've got any recommendations for content, things that you'd like us to see, talk through, we've even talked about things like the music of Star Wars, like the origin of a Lietmoth, which is how Star Wars uses music to evoke an emotion, and how that pays off from when you hear the Force theme with Obi-Wan originally, and then how it bookends at the beginning of the movie and bookends at the end in the throne room. We're really excited to talk about that, colors in Star Wars, color choices, cinematography. So we're really excited about kind of filming a lot of these videos, and we're hoping that you all like them too. But if you've got recommendations, please let us know. Other than that, Jeff, always excited every single week to be able to come on here, talk with you about Star Wars, and also talk with all of the listeners.
Absolutely. This is going to be a lot of fun. We got good content coming up. Thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful night, and we will talk to you soon.
Hey, bye everybody.